The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke.
Glory to you, Lord.
In the days of Herod, king of Judea, there was a priest named Zachariah of the priestly division of Abijah. His wife was from the daughters of Aaron, and her name was Elizabeth. Both were righteous in the eyes of God, observing all the commandments and ordinances of the Lord blamelessly. But they had no child, because Elizabeth was barren, and both were advanced in years. Once, when he was serving as priest, in his division's term before God, according to the practice of the priestly service, he was chosen by lot to enter the sanctuary of the Lord to burn incense. Then, when the whole assembly of the people was praying outside, at the hour of the incense offering, the angel of the Lord appeared to him, standing at the right of the altar of incense. Zachariah was troubled by what he saw, and fear came upon him. But the angel said to him, "Do not be afraid, Zachariah, because your prayer has been heard. Your wife Elizabeth will bear you a son, and you shall name him John. And you will have joy and gladness, and many will rejoice at his birth, for he will be great in the sight of the Lord. He will drink neither wine nor strong drink. He will be filled with the Holy Spirit, even from his mother's womb. And he will turn many of the children of Israel to the Lord their God. He will go before him in the spirit of the power of Elijah, to turn the hearts of fathers towards children, and the disobedient to the understanding of the righteous. Prepare a people fit for the Lord." Then Zechariah said to the angel, "How shall I know this? For I am an old man, and my wife is advanced in years." And the angel said to him in reply, "I am Gabriel, who stands before you. I was sent to speak to you and to announce you this good news. But now you will be speechless and unable to talk until the day these things take place, because you did not believe my words, which will be fulfilled at their proper time." Meanwhile, the people were waiting for Zechariah and were amazed that he stayed so long in the sanctuary. But when he came out, he was unable to speak to them, and they realized that he had seen a vision in the sanctuary. He was gesturing to them, but remained mute. Then when his days of ministry were completed, he went home. After this, his wife Elizabeth conceived, and she went into seclusion for 5 months, saying, "So has the Lord done for me at a time when he has seen fit to take away my disgrace before others." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
We have two readings today that deal with miraculous births. In the first one, in the Old Testament, the Jewish people didn't really have a king at the time that this was going on. And they would wait for leaders to arise when they had a military problem or kind of needed to work together. These judges would arise. And so this describes the preparation for the birth of Samson, that we've all heard, Samson, the man with great strength, and so on. And the guy with the long hair that Delilah cut his hair off and he became weak. Well, that's the same character. But there's this miraculous birth to a woman who has not had a child for all of her life. And then in the gospel reading, we hear about Elizabeth, the mother of John the Baptist, who is, and of course you got to realize in those days they didn't understand human reproduction. So being a patriarchal society, they didn't really blame women. They said the woman is barren. You notice that they don't say, the man is barren or can't have children. They say it's the woman's fault. And unfortunately, we're still trying to overcome that particular short-sightedness of humanity in our still overly patriarchal society. But that's for another sermon, another day. But as the story unfolds, and tomorrow and the next day, the rest of the reading happens where John the Baptist is born, and the people come and Elizabeth says his name's going to be John. And of course, family all want their child named after them. You know, I'm sure that never happened in your families. But anyway, so you know, Elizabeth says, well, his name's going to be John. And they kind of, well, there's no John in the family. Why would you do that? You know, you got to have some other name. And so Zechariah writes, you know, he's able to write even though he can't talk, and he writes his name is John. Oh, well, okay. And then as soon as he's named John, then he's able to speak again. And so these two beautiful births take place. And the reason I was kind of glad that the readings today came on the day when Catholic Charities was meeting was that one of the ministries that happens is dealing with families, first of all, struggling with children and dealing with issues of adoption and that sort of thing. And, you know, we all know families that wanted to have a child really badly, and finally maybe they were able to adopt. Or I had a young woman who came to me after, very shattered, her mother had committed suicide, and she wanted a child very badly, and someday she, you know, kind of her goal in life was, among other, in addition to her livelihood, was to find some man that was a good person she'd marry and have a child. And so that actually, I just 3 weeks ago baptized this baby. She is now with a beautiful man that's her husband out in Boston, and the story is unfolding in a really good way. But I know a lot of couples who never had children that wanted them in the worst way, and some of them chose to adopt. And then in addition to legal adoption, there's also other kinds of adoption. I have a priest friend in Cleveland, and Cleveland's a lot like Flint. They used to make ships, they used to make railroad cars and stuff. It was a really booming city, and as the industry got bad, it wound up being like Flint, where it was hard to get a job and stuff. And like a lot of Rust Belt cities, there were a lot of people that struggled with making a living, and a lot of them get in trouble with the police, and they wind up in jail or prison. So he goes, he's in his 80s now, but every week he goes to spend a couple hours with some of the guys in jail. And while he's there, he'll say, he'll ask these guys, how many here had a really loving, good father? And hardly ever does anyone put their hand up. You know, they just haven't had very good experiences sometimes of parenting. He says, well, for the next hour and a half or so, I'm going to be your dad. And they have very meaningful stuff happen. That's like he adopts them, at least for that little bit of time, and has a way of communicating his care in a very nifty way. And we kind of do that for each other. You know, we're always, some people have radar out where they're looking for who has a need, and is there something in me that can meet that need. Now, we all know where that's carried to the extreme, where a person gets used by someone else in a destructive way. But really, a therapist, in a sense, is adopting a person for an hour to listen to what's going on in their heart, and to, as they're listening, to see what answers lie within that person to bring about a change in their situation. And it may be dealing with alcohol or drugs, or how to parent more successfully, or how to be able to communicate with a spouse or significant other, or it could be a lot of different things. But in a sense, we all have that call, and being single is no exception to that. We're all called to really, really be caring. And I think I might have even mentioned the story of my friend Ray Fulgham. Some of you may know Ray Fulgham, just died recently, but he was always on the streets of Flint. He knew every charitable group, he knew every agency, he knew every businessman and woman in downtown Flint. He was very mentally ill. He had substance abuse problems, but he also had a very good heart. And so I knew stories and heard times where he would go to one agency begging, and they might give him like a whole cake or pie, and he would go to another agency and donate it because he had that kind of heart that wanted to give and to share. And I noticed as I would spend a lot of time with him around children or around people that were struggling. One time I took him to the laundromat, and we were getting ready to leave, and he had a couple of pop bottles in his possession, and that would be a little bit of money, you know. And he saw a man that was sitting by the door of the laundromat who was, you could just tell things had not been going well for him. And Ray stepped out of the car again. I thought, what's he doing? He said, hey fella, he said, do you want these pop bottles? And the guy said, oh yeah, sure I would. And so he went over and gave them to him. And Ray was dying of cancer, and about 2 months later he was dead. But what he carried with him was that kind of goodness. So you don't have to be a millionaire. You don't have to have it all together. You can still have all kinds of problems, difficulties, struggling, be without a home, but that doesn't excuse us from caring or saying, I can still love, I can still care, I can still reach out and touch somebody, even if it's for a minute. And for those of us in the, quote, helping professions, which includes Deacon Mike and myself and those that are working for Catholic Charities, you know, we're just constantly kind of in a relationship of adopting someone, at least for a little while, and treating them as if they're family, treating them, this is somebody that I'm called, Jesus is calling me to love. That's what it's about. And we see in the story of Scrooge, it's probably my favorite story. Every year I read A Christmas Carol, and I always act, it's like I never read it before. And there's this wonderful story of this grasping, miserable skinflint who nobody values at all because he's just so wretched and selfish, and you know, it's all about his bank account and all that stuff, and the way he treats the poor, the way he treats carolers, the way he treats the man who had taught him the business, the way he treats the girl that he thought was going to marry him. It just goes on and on, all the bodies he's left behind. But it's not too late to really convert and change and grow and become a man who, as the end of the story says, lives Christmas in his heart. And I think the call to working at Catholic Charities, the call to spending a few hours in the warming center is to say, how can I live Christmas in my heart in a place like this? What can I do? How can I be? How can I love? You know, I may die on my way home. I might get in a car accident. You may live another 60 years. You may live 5 years. You may live, you know, who knows? But it's all, the question for that is there a way, how am I going to adopt people into my life as I do this? And how am I going to love? What am I going to do to love other people? And that's the call of Advent. It's the call of Christmas. It's the call of Jesus all the time.